There's no city like a mad city. So when I did my earlier video on Gotham, I'd said it had been my hope to catch up on season 3 by the time season 4 started airing. That didn't happen, but I have now caught up on season 3. Here's the plan. So this video is going to be kind of an overview of my thoughts on season 3 as a whole, and then starting next week, I will watch the 2 episodes that I missed so far and see that one. So next week, I will do a review of those first 3 episodes, and then after that, I will do reviews of the new episodes as they air, because honestly, I'm missing having a weekly show to get to talk to you guys about, and yeah, it's going to be Gotham for a bit. So season 3 of Gotham, it was pretty good. I was definitely having fun throughout most of it. There are going to be a ton of spoilers in this, and I am going to jump around. There's not going to be particularly structured thoughts, but overall, so it started out really well. I remember I actually watched those first 4 episodes on an airplane, and I remember just watching them thinking, man, I've missed this show. Because it's just, right off the bat, so crazy. And that's that's a big part of what I love about it. I love how nuts it is. I mean, the show is stupid. It failed every possible logic test. There's a whole bunch of stuff that makes no sense if you apply real world logic. But honestly, it makes a surprising amount of comic book logic, and people who criticize the stupidity of this show obviously don't read a lot of comics, because comics can be equally this dumb. It's just rarely does that particular stripe of comic book superhero idiocy make it to the screen, because the screen has to be the serious version, and Gotham is not that, and that's a big part of why I love it. So we got the Mad Hatter right off the bat. He was a lot of fun. I enjoyed him. I kind of wish they hadn't gone the extra degree to have him like messing with his younger sister. I personally like the Mad Hatter a little bit more when there's almost an innocence to his madness, where like he retreats into this thing of rhyming and manipulating people because he just doesn't know how to function, as opposed to it being for something as devious as messing with kids. So that's not my preferred take on the Mad Hatter. That said, they didn't overplay it too much, and it did make sense in terms of how his sister was going to work and how that all played out. The whole thing with the Tetch virus was okay. I didn't love it, but it worked fairly well. It worked as a decent through line, as something to deal with. That said, the episode sort of immediately following the sort of capture of Tetch, of the Mad Hatter, there were 3 or 4 episodes that were a little bit of a lull, and the show got a bit soap opera-y, and I had that feeling watching it, and it took me a little while to figure out why. I think there were a couple of things. The first is that we had dealt with the Mad Hatter, and then we were basically watching the dominoes fall over several episodes, and with a more condensed cast than usual. There were a lot of characters who didn't start showing up till later on in the season, and I loved when they showed up again. And I think I'll probably come back to that. But there was a stretch there where we were only dealing with like a core focus on Lee and Jim, and Bruce and Selina, and Ed and Oswald, and it did start to feel a little soap opera-ish. It was still Gotham soap opera-ish, so it was nuts and ridiculous. And speaking on the Ed Oswald thing, first of all, I normally don't go in for shipping. It's not my thing, because I think more often than not it is kind of forced in, and it very often adds very little. In this case, I really liked how that played out. I liked what it kind of showed about Oswald. I like how Ed reacted to it. I love how it just stoked this venom between them. I loved how all that played out. It could have been very, very just uninteresting, uninspired, cheesy. It wasn't. It was really kind of fascinating to watch. The whole thing with the clone felt like more of a logistical necessity than anything else, and didn't feel like it really went anywhere. That said, the actor, I forget most of the performers' names in this, so I'm not going to mention him, but the actor who plays Bruce, he's getting quite good in this part, first of all, and I liked that you could tell the difference in his performance, even when the clone was looking exactly like Bruce, that he did almost a Batman voice as clone Bruce, which was cool. He just went a little bit deeper, and I thought that was kind of cool. I thought that was neat. And Selina's working for, when Selina got pushed out the window and the cats came around her, I was like, wow, okay, we're doing that. All right, which those are the kind of moments I love in Gotham. Every now and then it can surprise me. I'm just like, okay, so that's a thing now, and I just kind of roll with it. I'm not sure there's anything the show could do that I would be like, wow, I never thought it would go there. Occasionally it can take a twist that I wouldn't have predicted, but I'm not sure there's any level of insanity it could bring at this point where I'd actually be shocked. Maybe if aliens showed up, that might be a step too much. I think that'd be it though. So once things really kicked into high gear again, once Jerome showed up, and Jerome's little stretch of episodes, I think he had 2, was probably my favorite stuff. And I really like the way he's being used, and not only the way he's being used, but the fact that they are using him very carefully. When he shows up, he dominates the story, as you would expect this character to do. However, they don't overuse him, and that's a big key. I mean, that's a big part of why he was so memorable in the second season, and that's a big part of why he's so memorable here. He shows up, sucks all the oxygen out of the room, but then leaves before you really start to feel like he's taking away from the other characters. It's just great use of the character and a wonderfully over-the-top performance. Jerome is terrific. I love it. And there's a moment that I really love, and it may be something that I'm reading into, possibly even more than was intended, because I don't know how much credit to give these writers for being clever, considering how nuts the show is. But there was a moment that happened in the episode where he's got Bruce and he's got the clown makeup on him, and things are just going crazy. It was a moment I loved, where the Joker, he's tortured, he's trying to knock this guy into this tank of piranhas or whatever, and he says a line to Bruce. It says, "Gotham doesn't have heroes." And after he said that, the camera just lingered on Bruce for a while, and you could see the wheels turning. And I felt like in that moment, we really truly saw the seed of Batman, or the seed of Gotham's Batman, which is that it's not about vengeance for his parents. It's about being a counterbalance to people like Jerome, where he is inspiring madness. Bruce will have to inspire heroism. He will have to inspire hope. And that is the side of Batman that I think is getting more lost, especially in the adaptations these days, which are very big on the grimness and the grittiness, and less with him as a symbol of hope, as a beacon of hope. I mean, Christopher Nolan's trilogy talked about that a little bit. In practice, it didn't really show that as much. It didn't really back it up. And I think that moment might have been intentional, because later on, when Bruce gets kind of his whole brainwash thing, is basically shown, like, look, you shut off your emotions and your pain and everything else, you lose your connection to people. And it kind of seems to be re-emphasizing this idea of he's not being driven by dark rage. He has that, but what is driving him is a need to bring hope and a need to help. And that is a nice shift from the version of Batman we're getting more often than not these days. So I really like that. Like I said, Bruce is working pretty well for me. I'll just mention Alfred, because he was kind of what snapped Bruce out of it. I love Sean Pertwee. I think he's terrific in this part. He might even be my favorite Alfred. That being said, he's kind of coming down with Worf syndrome a little bit, which is that it's been established that he's a decent fighter. He can look after himself, but he gets knocked out a lot. He keeps getting thrown around to establish that somebody else is a bigger, badder threat, which is what happened to Worf all the time on Star Trek The Next Generation. So he's suffering from that a little bit. It's not too bad, though. Coming back to the virus, the whole thing with Captain Barnes was fine. That was a realm of cheesy where maybe they pushed it a little too far. I could roll with it pretty much until he was in the executioner thing and he had like the black across the eyes. That was like, that's, even for this show, that's kind of goofy. But it worked well enough. And things really started picking up at the tail end when basically everybody came back. Fish came back, Mr. Freeze came back, Firefly came back. And it made me realize that the lull that I mentioned before, I was missing the freak. So it was really great to have them back. I mentioned just the love triangle between Oswald and Ed. It was interesting to me to watch Ed. He became slightly less interesting once he actually put the suit on and demanded to be called the Riddler. I'm not sure why. It wasn't a huge drop off. It was like going from here to here, but I found him slightly more interesting when he wasn't actually using the name. I'm not entirely sure why. And Oswald seemed slightly more whiny this season. I mean, he can be that way anyway. I think Ed summed him up very well when he called him a child throwing a tantrum. And that's always been true. He seemed a little whinier this season than is normal, but given how emotionally driven a lot of his motivations were, that makes sense. I'm just hoping that they maybe ease off that a little bit. When I did my previous video, I mentioned Barbara. I love Barbara, which is crazy because I hated her. Season 1. I thought she was the worst thing. And then she went crazy. She became more interesting. Then she hooked up with the villains. She became more fun. Then she started to try and run the city, which was ridiculous and awesome. And I was really sorry to see her get killed off in the way that she was. But at the same time, it felt right because with the escalation they'd had with her from normal to killer to, working her way into the crime world to trying to run it, I don't know where else you could go with her after that. And it probably was better to bow her out rather than keep the wheels spinning. I'm talking about her death as if I expect it to be permanent, and I kind of do. It's not impossible for her. I mean, at this point, the show has established anybody can come back. So she may still come back, but there was something about that moment that felt more final. Obviously, Butch, we're going to get back in some form. We dropped the name Cyrus Gold. Solomon Grundy, we're getting that. That'll be fun. And I fully expect Ed to come back. I mean, they're just going to leave him in a block of ice forever? No, I don't think so. So a number of the deaths felt very much like this is just, forgive the phrase, this is just us putting them on ice for a little bit. They'll probably be back. I think Fish is probably dead for good this time, and that's about the one death that felt a little bit anticlimactic because as much as I love Barbara and I'm kind of sad to see her go, it felt right. It felt like the right time and the right circumstances. Fish, it felt a little anticlimactic because they bring her back again. She doesn't do much and then she just gets stabbed by someone who didn't really mean to stab her. And it was a little like, oh, you brought her back just to do that? Okay. And I suppose talking other villains, the Court of Owls is all right. It's not awful. It's not the worst thing ever. It's certainly, in terms of like big mysterious motivations, it beats the heck out of the Hand over on the Marvel Netflix shows, but it's still not great. And it suffers from the same problem most secret society villains suffer from, which is that in trying to find the balance between establishing them as threats but keeping them mysterious, generally they just become uninteresting because you don't know enough about them to really get invested in the stakes of what it means to deal with them, yet at the same time you're watching what they do and it oftentimes it just seems really small potatoes. They talk bigger than they do often, and then even when they act bigger, it turns out, well, there's someone else behind them. Well, couldn't we have just jumped to Ra's al Ghul? Did we need the middle whole middle step with the Court of Owls? I don't know. Hugo Strange coming back was another really fun thing. I love B.D. Wong in that part. He's perfect balance between sinister and weaselly. Like when he thinks he's in control, he's very, and he's like, ooh, scary. But then the instant he realizes he's not in control, he's like, bye now. I love that. That's terrific. Ra's al Ghul, don't really have a thought on him yet. He just kind of shows up. He hasn't done much. So they've established that he's there. He hasn't done enough that I have an opinion on him. I'm glad that the court seems to now be done and gone. Because, as I said, while the court didn't detract heavily, it also didn't add a heck of a lot. Certainly their whole storyline was nowhere near what I was interested in. Anytime they got a focus, when it cut back to, say, Oswald and Ed, or, the Army of Freaks, or Selena and Bruce, or anything that wasn't the court, I'd be going, oh, okay. And again, I wasn't bored during the Court of Owls stuff, but it was usually the least interesting part of any given episode that storyline was moving forward in. I think that about does it. Overall, season 3 started strong, had a little dip, got better again, had a nice spike when Jerome showed up, and then got better again for the home stretch. Given how long these seasons are, 20 plus episodes, that's pretty good. It's almost impossible to stay at a consistently high level for 20 plus episodes in a season, which is a big part of why I've gravitated more towards shorter season shows like Doctor Who, Game of Thrones, Westworld, etc. I mean, those can have their lulls too, but it's almost a given that you're going to get a stretch of 2 or 3 episodes on a 20-something episode show. So for this to be going as strong as it was and to have as many high points as it did, this was a pretty good season. I think I like season 2 a little bit better, although I may need to rewatch season 2 because that might have more to do with realizing just how crazy it was going to be and the excitement I had from that, whereas this season is just sort of more living in that craziness that's already been established. But yeah, no, it's I have so much fun with the show. All the cast is good. I suppose the last thing I didn't talk about, Lee and James, they're fine. They're okay. They were better than the Court of Owls. Here's what I did like. I did like that they really pushed that relationship, and they really pushed Lee to the edge. And much like Barbara, she became more interesting the more damage they made her. And that, as I say that, it skeeves me a little bit. But normally it would. Normally the sort of, we can't have a normal character, except in the world of Gotham, you really kind of can't have a normal character. That's not what this world is. So I'm a little bit more okay with that. But I did find it interesting just how far they were willing to push her, and it gave Miranda Baccarin a chance to actually do something more than just be lovely and supportive, which she does well, but it was nice to see her cut loose a little bit. Even though I think they might have banked too much on my investment in that relationship, it didn't break anything. So there were some high points, there were some points. There really was nothing that made me go meh throughout this season. So by my measure, that was a fun season of television. So those are my thoughts on Gotham Season 3. When I come back next week, I will talk about the first 3 episodes of Gotham Season 4, and then I'll just do videos on new episodes as they air. So, what were your thoughts on Season 3 of Gotham? Whatever they are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Don't forget to like, subscribe, check me out on Twitter at Council of Geeks. Give a listen to the Council of Geeks podcast feed, available on iTunes and Stitcher. I'm also one half of the Punch Like a Girl podcast, which will be premiering on the Fire and Water Network later in October. So until next time, this council is adjourned.